Good afternoon, everyone. This is a continuation of the FY20 operating budget and CIP amendments for the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. We do have 5 items this afternoon, so we're going to get right into our work. First item, it's with General Services, Fleet Management, and NDA Motorpool Fund, and we do have here Director of DGS, Mr. Dice. I see Mr. Gregoson is here as well, and we have other folks from OMB and the FMS as well. Ms. Farag has put together a packet for us, and so why don't we get right into the highlights and then decision points.
Good afternoon, Susan Farag, Council staff. This is the Department of Fleet Management Services, Division of Fleet Management Services, within DGS. For FY20, the executive is recommending total expenditures of about $85 million, and that's an $11 million increase or 15% over the approved budget from last year, which is fairly significant, and it's going to be funding some fairly significant items for your review. The first one I just wanted to point it out was the Motorpool Internal Service Fund, which funds all of these items. It's projected to have a year-end fund balance this year of $7.6 million, and the fiscal plan is attached at Circle 7. The year-end fund balance for FY20 is projected to be $1.5 million. The rates are set to achieve cost recovery and to maintain a fund balance of approximately 3% of resources, and this projected end-of-year balance coming up for FY20 is estimated to be about 1.7%. For FY20, the first item on your agenda today is the vehicle replacement plan. During the recession, fleet was cut significantly. I mean, it just really suffered. It was an easy cut to make, but then, of course, it had unintended consequences. So for the past several years, they've had a vehicle replacement plan that's averaged about $10 million a year. That has, it was ratcheted back a couple of years, but it's back up full force again, and it's for $11 million total this year, which is an increase over last year of about $4.2 million. We currently have about 3,300 vehicles in the county fleet, and the fleet composition is outlined for you on Circle 8, and that provides information on the type of vehicle, the fuel source it uses, and its average age. The divisions generally had a vehicle replacement backlog of about 1,000 vehicles since FY14. This year they're planning on replacing approximately 263 vehicles this year, and that includes 135 public safety vehicles, 83 administrative vehicles, and 45 pieces of heavy equipment. Charts showing the breakdown of that type and agency are also included for your review on Circles 9 through 10. The next significant item up is the US 29 flash operating costs to fund support for the BRT. That expenditure provides support for the new 60-foot articulated buses for this route that's expected to be implemented in May of 2020. To support these, it will require 4 new lifts, having 6 columns each for $273,000. It also requires specialized tools and training materials for another $500,000, and an initial parts inventory for these buses for about $700,000. The remaining $400,000 is going to include prorated costs for staff, and it includes 5 mechanics and a crew chief.
Let's take a pause here for a second. Sure. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a quick question on this because, a lot has been discussed, and I think there's shared interest on the new flash route, but I just specifically wanted to ask, is the 6 new positions for flash, is that the total amount of new positions that the flash program is going to have, and that the bus drivers are being moved from different places, or this is just for the maintenance aspect of the fleet, and there are different operating costs related to bus drivers and other?
For the record, David Dice, Director, Department of General Services. This is just the fleet cost. This is the maintenance of the vehicles, not the operating of the vehicles. So it's not the drivers. This is just a maintenance crew. And again, remember, this is a 24/7 operation. So this is over the course of the 24-hour day, full crew, full chief, with a crew chief to maintain the vehicles at the MTOC facility. Not drivers, just maintenance.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. President. Fleet being an internal service fund, these costs will actually, technically, if I can put it this way, this budget is not appropriated as fleet. It is the costs of this service, not just to transit for Flash, but for all vehicles.
All departments.
Are charged back to the user departments. So this 1.9 million shown here is actually also a budget increase in the transit budget, so that they may pay when they're charged back for fuel, maintenance, et cetera.
The next item is fuel costs are increasing for FY20 by about 1.9 million. I have provided a corrected chart for you. That is to replace the lower chart on that page for FY20 fuel projections. They just had a couple of typos in it. Projected consumption of all three types of the fuel are expected to increase this year. Compressed natural gas usage is supposed to decrease just slightly. The next two items I'd like to take in conjunction, including the wage equity study and overtime increases to address structural budget deficiencies. Back in November 2017, OHR had conducted a study of mechanic technician classification series, and that study ensured that the duties and responsibilities of that classification were accurately reflected in the classification specifications and the assigned grade to make sure that compensation was appropriate. And because of that study, the Mechanic Technician 2 and the Senior Mechanic classes received a 1-grade increase. And for FY19, the approved operating budget included an additional $382,000 for that increased compensation. And in addition, 2 new classes were created for the transit bus and the heavy equipment mechanic leads. The study didn't address the fact that reclassifying 2 of these job classifications would result in wage compression. So in last October, McGeo, OHR, and DGS reached an agreement to create a new salary table for the mechanics series. And the cost of moving mechanics to the new salary table is going to be about $546,000. It dovetails in with this overtime piece. The actual overtime costs for DFMS in FY18 exceeded the budget by about $567,000. Or I'm sorry, the budget was $567,000 and it exceeded by $386,000. For FY19, the overtime budget through the third quarter is $720,000 or $153,000 above the approved amount. The budgeted amount for overtime has not been increased since FY14, and DFMS is advised that it has an ongoing problem trying to retain mechanics, and this has caused the use of additional overtime to fill vacancies. Overtime is also impacted by disability and light duty restrictions, and it might help if the executive branch could clarify for the committee if the new classification series that's providing increased compensation will actually help reduce overtime, and would it also help with retention of mechanics, as that has seemed to be a historical problem.
Who would like to address that?
Would you like an answer to that?
Yes, we would.
Okay. There's actually a number of issues that Ms. Farag has pointed out that interplay. It's not so much, I'll start at the end and try and cover all of them. It's not so much an issue of retention. We actually lose mechanics through retirement. They age out. It's a great place to work. The problem that we've had is the ability to recruit new mechanics. For every 4 people we talk to, we get positive responses from 1 or 2 of those. The problem has been that while it's a great place to work once you're there, we haven't paid enough to get you attracted to come in. And so there's been a lot of I don't want to use the word haphazard, but look, I just did, ways of recruitments in the past as far as experience relative to pay, because there hasn't been a standard. So what we've had a long-term challenge with staff where I could have a mechanic with 12 years of experience that's making more than working side by side doing the same job as a mechanic with 20 years of experience. And so that's created a lot of unrest and a lot of challenges on an annual basis. And of course, with each year, that gap gets more and more. So we've recognized the problem. Gino, Ren, and I have agreed that there's an issue that needed to be addressed. So we've been working for a couple of years now and trying to fix that and normalize. So basically what we did, in addition to the grade increase that we got, we created a higher level position so that when a mechanic, because with McGeo, we also agree that being able to demonstrate to the county residents that we have a properly trained and expert staff of mechanics is appropriate. So we created a next level for mechanics that get ASC certifications, whether in transit or in heavy equipment maintenance. So that when they go to, we have a lot of mechanics that eventually try and move into the heavy shop because it's not 24-hour shifts. It's a better place to age out, if you will, in your career. And so, but we want to make sure that people are properly trained and certified. We actually have a very high level and high quality in-depth training program of 6 months of classwork and 6 months on the shop floor. So that's learning how to do things the way we need them to be done. But all coupled with the ASC certification is a tremendous training program. So we raised the grade, we increased. Now that's had a resulting minor increase in overtime because the mechanics are being paid more. But it's also, when we did this, it accentuated the grade disparity between years of service and rates of pay. So we spent a lot of time, and kudos to DGS and HR staff as well as the folks at McGeo in trying to come up with a fair and balanced program so now we have within the mechanic class steps of pay that match the years of service and more importantly years of experience. So we could have a mechanic that's a newly hired but came to us with 20 years of experience. Well, he or she should get credit for the experience that they brought in here because we benefit from that, even though they've only been here for a year or two. So that it was a very involved and complex process, but we're at agreement on the various steps and requisite years of experience. So not only when we recruit people, if you've been at a dealership for 12 years, you know what step you qualify for when you come, and more importantly, you know what your future career looks like. So it's created a lot of calming of unrest. We're still in the final stages of working out the final settlement agreement with the union. We hope to have that done very soon. But the end result is this is a one-time fix. Most importantly, it eliminates the likelihood of future challenges and disparities.
So, Dice, have you had any interactions, for example, with the school system, conversations that we continually have regarding trades and regarding these kinds of, opportunities to give students another path that they may want to pursue, and at the same time, that helps us in recruiting, as you were saying. It's kind of a win-win. We talk a lot about that in terms of the private sector, but I wonder if there have been any conversations to see whether we could have almost like a pilot program.
We have had discussions. My folks actually attend trade school shows, job recruitment fairs as far up as into Pennsylvania, east into Delaware. We travel quite extensively to try and recruit people, but we would like to, as you know, Ms. Navarro, because of the wide variety of things in which DGS involves, both in the automotive trades but also in the building trades, there's a tremendous challenge and a dearth of upcoming talent and trained individuals. So yes, I'm a strong proponent of this. We've had some early discussions with Ana Mendez University as well as some folks from Montgomery College, but it needs to be explored more. We have an alternative path. I'd like to see the combination of trade training and college business training, so that at the end of trade school, not only do I have a trained mechanic or an electrician or a plumber, I have someone who's been trained in how to start and operate a business.
Yeah.
And that's a strong boost for a local economy.
So could we, just looking at staff, can we try to schedule perhaps in the summer a more in-depth just conversation regarding this piece to see whether we can push, a very sort of intentional and very strategic partnership, and then have some particular targets just to see how that might work. 'Cause I think it would be an incredible opportunity for young people and for us.
Well, you'll
That's
find
what
me
Vice
a
President
big
Katz.
supporter of that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So, and I'd written down about the training, but so we do, if someone comes to to you that need certification and whatever, they're certified in something but not certified in something else. So the county does pay for that certification?
Yes.
How does that work?
We will pay for the training and the testing. If you fail, second time's on you. But we provide internal training, again, on, a lot of the training that you get in, even the ASC training is generic. But we're working on specific models of buses, specific types of buses, specific types of equipment, hydraulics, mechanics, brakes, everything. So I have a staff of 3 full-time trainers, and they have a bay at the at MTOC facility that is used exclusively for training. And so no matter how much experience or what variety or type of experience you've had, when you come to Montgomery County Fleet, we want to train you in fleet norms. So you learn the hydraulics of a Gillig bus or a Mack truck, or the various transmissions and the electronics and the hydraulics. So that's school training, classroom training, and then supervised. You're on the mechanic floor, but you get supervised, and then skills tested as well. So we're actually coming up with a nice little certificate that certifies you as a Montgomery County trained mechanic.
And so, and the years of service, does that include, if you're saying you give someone, if they've been a mechanic for 12 years or whatever, that's years of service, but does years of service include the certification?
Yes.
So they'd have to be both, you're saying, in a way.
That's correct.
Right, which is, and then the whole thing about overtime, and we go through this for every department, I guess. Firefighters is certainly, the conversation comes up all the time. But there's a spot where the overtime costs less than having to hire people because of the benefits. And so we have to figure, and I don't know what that number is, but we have to figure out how that works.
Well, the other challenge with that, though, I have a highly trained, very capable, I think the world of my mechanics and assess their skills is above average, but they're getting older, and the longer they work, the more tired they get. And our biggest injuries in the mechanic workforce are back injuries and injuries on the hands because of what they do. And we see when overtime increases, injuries
Big
increase.
factor, yeah.
So we need to, the best way to combat that is to come up with a full recruitment. I currently have 8 mechanic positions unfilled.
Wow.
And that has an impact, a ripple effect across the organization in every one of my 3 shifts. Remember, we're 24/7, 365. We doze, but we don't close.
Wow. Does that include you?
Yes, well, I some of us doze more than others.
All right. Thank you very much.
Senator Friedson?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the vacancies, and I think that speaks to what the council president was mentioning about how the connection with the school system of creating our own pipeline is so important because, we have a workforce challenge, and we're not unique in this sense, particularly for these middle-skilled jobs that are really good middle-class careers and always have been, and I think we've gone away from them a little bit, and now everybody is realizing what damage that has and how we have a skills disconnect with the open careers that we have in the economy in general. I appreciate this conversation. I mentioned at full council session about a month ago, my grandfather, our family was in the car business, and he started a program for incarcerated youth to learn about auto mechanics to create a pipeline for careers for young people. And it obviously is just a crucially important opportunity for so many in our community, and also is critical for the county as well, for our workforce and for the broader economy. I don't have that big of a concern if we are training really good mechanics for really great careers and they go on to work somewhere else. We're still benefiting as a community from the training that we have done with those folks. And I think just speaking about the overtime, the one additional wrinkle besides injuries and some of the other challenges, we're also heavily depending on a smaller number of people.
Yes.
So when that person is sick, that person has childcare, a sick kid, a sick parent, a sick spouse, whatever the case may be, or when they retire or they move careers for whatever reason, the amount of person hours that we are banking on that employee is more than one. And so the challenge of then filling that void becomes even greater. And so we are, disproportionately banking on folks, and we are increasing the risk. When you have more people with better hours, you're mitigating that risk across more people. So I think that there's just a lot of benefit from having a healthier workforce where it's overtime for a reason, because it's too many hours. And if it's an emergency, it's an emergency. But if it becomes the norm, that becomes the problem.
And it's a limited pool because these are specific skill sets. I don't want to pull in someone who, I've swapped brakes on my F-250. This is far more complicated than that. So that's why we invest heavily in training and why we're reliant upon that pool of trained individuals. If I could just say, Councilmember Friedson, as you were talking about the whole concept, this is, I think one of the other elements is that we need to raise the level of respect that for skills trained individuals, that this is not an alternative choice. Yeah. It is in fact a choice, an honorable choice to take on a trade skill and create and run a business. There's an awful lot of highly educated people who tremble at the thought of putting it out there to start a business. So I think we need to raise that whole spectrum of respect.
You're getting a lot of nods up here, and I think all of us couldn't agree with you more. And these really are careers that are critical to fueling our economy. And so as much effort we can put into training them and working with the school system to create that pipeline, I think is terrific. So glad we are having the conversation.
Okay.
The next item is bus service lanes. This shows an increase of $533,000. The bus service lane contract provides for the daily bus cleaning, fueling, and safety inspections. The budgeted cost for this contract in FY19 was $2.9 million. Generally speaking, most of DFMS's contracts have cost escalation clauses in them that are tied to the CPI. This one didn't. It has subsequently been rebid this past year, and the FY20 cost reflects an 18.3% increase over a flatline budget, and the CPI had increased by 16.4% during the same time period. And the last item is the Motorpool Fund Contribution NDA for $187,000. This is an account that funds the acquisition of new and additional motor pool vehicles. It does not deal with replacement vehicles that are financed through the chargeback mechanism. For FY20, this budget includes $123,000 for new patrol vehicles for the new police positions that were added during FY19, and it has $64,000 for 2 new vehicles for 2 housing code inspector positions in DHCA. At this point, council staff's recommending approval as submitted.
Any other questions from my colleagues? Okay, with that, then we accept the executive recommended total expenditure of $84,869,295 for fleet management services. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, staying on with DGS, we'll just switch over to item number 2, which is FY20 capital budget and amendments to the capital improvements program for general government projects. Ms. Price.
Thank you. So today before you have the FY20 operating budget as well as FY20 capital improvements project amendments. Going through the operating budget, there are a number of changes that the executive has recommended. Overall, the budget is set to increase by $2.2 million, nearly 6% over the FY19 approved budget. Some of the highlights included in the budget, a lot of the changes are centered in facilities. This year, in order to begin to address the structural deficits within DGS, the executive has recommended adjusting their laps by $181,867. And additionally, they have added in $309,733 for overtime. Every year, pretty much since DGS has been a department within the county government, their budget has been overspent, and a lot of that is due to overtime and responding to emergency incidents throughout the year that are hard to plan for. So this begins to provide some funding in their budget to be able to address that. Additionally, the executive has added $1 million for new building openings. Included in that $1 million is funding for Glen Echo Park. The county initiated an agreement with the National Park Services in July of 2018 to take over maintenance of that facility. So funds are provided for that as well as the new Wheaton Library Rec Center coming online. Moving on, there are some additional smaller items that the executive has recommended. One of them deals with remaining in compliance with EPA regulations for shooting ranges, as well as savings for switching alternative community service workers with our existing contract, and reducing the budget for the AFI Silver Theater to meet target reductions. And I have concurred with the executive's recommendation for all of those changes. Moving to maintenance and housekeeping, the executive has recommended $6.497 million for custodial work in county facilities. I've created a chart on page 6 that outlines how the remainder of the housekeeping work would be performed. It's not under contract, it's with actual county staff, building service workers that we have. They are allocated across a number of buildings in the Rockville core. One item that I'd like to point out, in the council office building, there has been a number of discussions regarding the cleanliness of the building and wanting to enhance services in that area. There had originally been 3 positions that were funded, but one of those positions is vacant. It's my understanding that that position will be filled in FY20 and assigned to the council office building, so we will again have a full staffing complement of 3 building service workers in the building.
Yeah, I think that one of the people in the council office building that reached out to you to get some information was Council President Navarro, recognizing that we do need some help. It's not lost on me that the EOB has 8 cleaning staff and the COB has 3, but one of them was vacant. And if we're going to apply, this whole notion of traffic of people, I would submit that this is a building that has a lot of people coming in and out. We have a lot of residents coming here, constituents coming in, et cetera. So this is an important issue. I was looking at all of this thinking that 3 definitely is not even enough, that I think we should at least go to 4. I understand that we have this reconciliation list issue, but did you say that would be like $55,301 to add another position? Is that?
Yes, the cost of the position is $55,301. So if another position were to be added on the reconciliation list, that would be the cost for FY20.
Does that include benefits?
I believe so.
That
Yes.
was my
No.
question.
Oh no. Okay, I'll need to get the updated cost from
I think-
DPS.
Yeah, all right, that'd be great, because I think I had requested that information, but I guess I didn't get it.
Okay, so you'd like to add a
No,
fourth?
I had actually asked for the number for salary and benefits, and I was told it was 55.
We can, I don't recall, I didn't see the question. We'll confirm the number.
Okay, so, do my colleagues concur that this would be a good addition? I think that, as we are also remodeling the building, the reality is that we do need some help with cleanliness. I mean, if not, it just defeats the purpose. If we could get that figure, that would be great, and we can poll colleagues if there is interest in the committee to placing it on the rec list.
All right, I will provide an updated number and place that item on the rec list.
Great, thank you.
If I may, we certainly don't dispute and do recognize the fact that the activity in this building warrants, and frankly, all of our buildings warrant a standard of cleanliness, which is why, in order to save costs, we have moved to a performance-based contracting for custodial services, which has in fact proven to be highly successful at libraries and rec centers where that has been deployed for a year now. And therefore, and the nice thing about that is it's not affected by the vacancy of a position or the absence of a worker for even a brief period of time, because the contractor's obligated to perform up to a standard. And the additional deep cleaning that we had typically planned and programmed in the past, which has now been rolled over into our performance contracts, has not been required because the work is being done on an ongoing basis, which is what we had looked at doing and do recommend pursuing, because that will ensure the same standards, but also overcome the challenges of having additional staff. That said, we would still have staff, county staff present for unusual occurrences, for special events, but we can deploy them throughout the Rockville core, whether it's 401, the JC, EOB, or the COB. We can deploy them throughout the area with a great deal more flexibility under that model than what is currently being done, and that's why the recommendation is for performance-based contracting. I know we get connected with folks.
I am absolutely open to that, but Ms. Price, I had asked about that as well, but in your packet, you recommended against that.
That is correct, and I just want to update the committee. The number, including salary and benefits, is 55,000. So that number would be on the reconciliation list. And speaking to my recommendation to not enter into a performance-based contract at this time, we have staff that we've had working in the building for quite some time. They're very familiar with our offices, very familiar with our personnel, and they have been making themselves available to help in the event that we have additional needs. I think transitioning to a contract would take away of the benefit of having that dedicated staff. So I think increasing our complement would get us a higher quality, higher level of service, and we would continue to be able to have dedicated staff.
We'd like the opportunity to follow. We have supporting evidence, comments from Recreation and Library showing that, in fact, that transition wasn't difficult. I mean, they had contract services already, but the standards that that are achieved, in fact, comments along the lines of our buildings have never been done better. That's pretty remarkable. And again, the staff we're not laying people off. We're just redeploying them, and they still are available. It's true that you don't see the same individual on your floor every day, but ultimately the objective is a standard of cleanliness and orderliness that we can be proud of, and doing so at a reasonable cost.
I think that given the fact that we have been without an appropriate complement, I would say that the folks that we have here have really gone above and beyond.
Oh, without a doubt, they're wonderful.
And I'm sure that if we had an appropriate complement, then we could probably experience that very high level of excellence, and that's why I do believe that this proposal of first getting ourselves to a decent complement, and then maybe in a year's time, when there's a little bit more of a sense of how that goes, we could have a conversation about the performance contract. But, of course, there's a little bit of history here where we have been foregoing this kind of, service because we were very cognizant and sensitive to first ensuring that libraries and schools, not in school, but all the other facilities that had the same challenges, we wanted to focus on them, and we did. But I think now it's time for us to address it. So I think I would rather go with the council staff recommendation to just see how it goes. Councilman Pizza.
Yeah, I'm happy to yield to colleagues on this. I haven't been long enough to make a determination. I will say that I think the two folks well understaffed who do serve the building every day do a terrific job and are pleasant, and I think deserve credit for that. What is the best way to do it? I yield to the experts, of which I am not one. But I was just curious because the Council President did make the comment about having one fewer than what we're programmed for. Was there ever any consideration of either from EOB or EOB is obviously the one that has the most, of deploying one of the folks here, or you talked about moving the resources around the Rockville core. Is there a reason why that?
No, we
hasn't been
have
done
in
up to this
fact moved people around and supplemented Part of the reduction is because the facility itself, the COB footprint, if you will, has been reduced some because of the construction activities. And so it's an apportionment of occupied square feet. And we have not been asleep at the wheel in recruiting for this position as well. Part of this is always ongoing balances of budget questions and lapses. These are important positions. This is one of those types of positions that people don't realize how important it is until it's not there. And these people do a yeoman's job that often goes underappreciated. But we do deploy. The property manager oversees the Rockville Corps, is redeploying his assets on a regular basis. There's just so much, and it doesn't seem like a large area, but there's an awful lot of square footage, and people get moved around on a pretty frequent basis. We've had the same situation over at 401, which is part of the Rockville Corps, and we've had to move people around on a regular basis. So we continue to work on it, but I'll just say one more time. This is why the performance-based, one of the reasons we have staff in Rockville is because of the nature of the buildings and the services that are here. But we've had such a tremendous turnaround in the level of service and quality of service through the performance-based contracting elsewhere that I really do think that we're not laying anybody off. We're strategically locating them where the need comes as the need arises. But the model of the future really is a performance-based contract.
Okay, great. Next item.
One other note that I'd like to add on facilities, the T&E committee had reviewed this budget last year, and the idea of having the performance-based contract had been introduced, and the T&E committee had planned to come back to this item and get an update from DGS to see how implementation has been going, because our stakeholders at libraries and recreation feel very strongly about this issue and have been wanting to see improvements. Having said that, the contracts had been executed, I believe, at the end of 2018. So in order to allow a little bit more time for the contracts to be implemented and for a transition period to occur, having a full update was not included for this work session today, but I do think that it would be very helpful for DGS to come back and update the committee on how implementation has been going and what improvements they've been seeing and what feedback they've gotten from their stakeholders as well.
Great.
Okay, so then that brings us to snow and storm cleanup. This item is not budgeted in DGS's budget, but I did think that it was helpful to include this in the packet. I have a history of their snow totals over the years. I will say that there is no appropriation within DGS's budget to cover snow. They are essentially reimbursed at the end of the fiscal year with the passage of the supplemental appropriation. And FY19's amount has just been updated. The new total is down $105,000. It's less than what's actually in the packet because the numbers have been adjusted. And I did want to point out that going forward, which is different from prior years, DGS, they weren't able to actually charge to the non-departmental account to cover their snow expenses, but there will be an update going forward this year, and they will have access to that NDA to charge their expenses against, which will alleviate the use of those expenditures coming out of their budget.
I just want to report that T&E did approve this morning, this amount, the lower amount.
A lower amount. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, for real estate.
It's going to snow less?
Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
Real estate and energy and sustainability, there are no changes there. Every year, Energy and Sustainability puts out an annual report, which is required by law, and their report is up online, and there is a link to access that report in the packet.
And I believe you received copies of this. If you didn't, I have some here for you. This is the Green Government Report, yeah.
Okay, and then for central duplicating, one position has been converted to create a full-time position for a project search intern that has graduated for the program. So that concludes all of the changes for the operating budget. And then I'll move over to the capital budget. There are a number of changes that council staff approves of, technical adjustments, and then some transfers, which I'll get into in a moment. For facility planning, the executive has amended the project to reflect prior year cost savings, and a status report of all of the candidate projects and studies is attached, circles 23 through 24. Moving to plan lifecycle asset replacement, this project has two amendments for the committee to review today. The first one includes a shift of $566,500 from the elevator modernization program, environmental compliance and life safety systems. These are FY18 funds that were transferred over to replace the UPS and the data system and the data center, which is mission critical. And council staff does approve of that request. This is something that has to be taken care of to respond to safety concerns and the increases in demand. The other item,
Can you remind me what UPS stands for in this?
it's uninterruptible power supply. So then the next item is for the Blackrock Center for the Arts. Again, this is an amendment within PLAR. This project had come before the Arts and Review Panel. There is a grant request made to renovate the building and provide for a number of updates within the facility. This is a county facility, so it made sense for those repairs to take place within a county project outside of cost sharing. So this has been shifted over to DGS to manage this project. And council staff concurs with the recommendation. Okay, so then the final item is for the council office building renovation. There is an amended PDF that was introduced on March 19th. After further review, the amount has been adjusted. The amount needed to fund the remainder of the scope of the project is $2,053,000. An itemized list of all of the items included in this update is included on page 10 of the packet. And council staff can answer any questions if there are any questions on what's remaining. And council staff does recommend approving the amendment as prepared by staff. And I would just like to point out one thing. The council had approved $1 million as a placeholder in FY18 to renovate the curtain wall windows at the south end of this building. A preliminary study has been completed at this time. However, it's undetermined the exact cost and which option will be selected going forward. So it is possible that the amounts could change, but right now we're looking at an estimated cost of $400,000, which is less than the placeholder that the council set aside, or it could go up as high as $2.5 million. So
Actually, that higher end is $2.8 million. So that's quite a range.
It is quite a range.
It's a heck of a curtain.
Yeah.
Well, one is, the $400,000 is basically a film over the windows, and the $2.8 million is a full replacement of the curtain wall. Right now, we have made no recommendation to replace that, and it's not in the project budget, but that's the range, $400,000 to $2.8 million. It depends on if you want to do it and what it is that you want to do.
400,000 is to put a film, and 2.8 is to replace the windows?
Yes.
What about the issue of energy? The whole lack of energy
Well, the options B and C, B being 2.5, C being 2.8, which are various stages of a virtual or wholesale replacement, do improve the thermal performance of the outer level of the building. The others are more ceiling windows and putting a film to address heat gain, so that there is some energy benefit. But clearly, the wholesale replacement would have the greater thermal impact. But that's just a lot of money.
I would want to point out, somewhat to what David said, we don't know at this point how much improvement as far as energy utility goes there would be between the $2.5 million option and the $400,000 option, and that's one thing we should be considering.
Right.
It's,
Absolutely.
at $2.5 million, it's a very high price tag in a limited budget.
Yeah.
The executive would still recommend at this point using the current $1 million funding for the curtain wall to partially address the increased costs of the existing renovations.
I would just add that, as I had stated earlier, we're still determining which option is the best one to go forward with at this point. So it's at this point too early to say what the total cost would be. But once we have a better idea, better understanding of what the best option, most cost-effective option would be, then we would or we would not be coming back for additional money to complete this item.
At that time, we can make a decision about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there currently is 0 contingents left in this project budget. This building's been a bag of surprises.
Really?
And disappointments, and so we're all spent up.
Council, Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much. How do we make the determination? Do we have somebody come in and give us suggestions? I mean,
We're happy to give you, have the consultant provide you a briefing on what's involved.
how much does that cost to get the consultant to tell
That's
us?
probably another.
2.8 million to have them come in and tell us that we should take.
Or you can trust me to read you the consultant.
You know, we need a consultant.
But,
Thank you, Mr. Mueller.
But
Yeah.
it frankly comes down to an issue of will. We can continue the way we're going. The building is performing considerably better than it did before. The
Only had
the
one way to
energy
go.
systems improvements have had their impact and effect. It's just how much better you want to make it. Will some infiltration still occur? Yes. If we don't do anything, sure. Can ladybugs still get in? Possibly, but if we do nothing. But it's just a matter of affordable willingness. This is a lot of money, as Bruce has observed, in a very tight CIP.
Well, and I have no problem that it's a lot of money, but I do think that we need some expert to come in and give us some advice. I mean, not to say that you're not an expert, but I think someone beyond your expertise.
Well, no
Because this
expert's
is a
going to
big difference.
tell you what you can do. They're going to ask you the same question because that's what they say to us. This is what you get. Which
Well,
one
then
do
at
you
least
want?
we would have that as a chart.
Oh, I can give you that, sure.
Yeah.
And if I may, can I ask, can we return to this subject in a couple of weeks? We will at that point have perhaps I'll call it a preliminary evaluation of the impact of the various 4 options.
Fine with me. Linda,
Ms. Price, so.
Linda, yeah.
I would be okay with seeing a revised number. I think that would be very helpful. It was my understanding that we would be progressing the design a little bit further in order to have a better idea of what the number is, but if they can provide a number before reconciliation, that would be fine.
And I'm sorry, just to be clear, Linda, I was talking about a number in the sense of the impact, the energy savings and such of the various options, not just the dollars.
Would the, if we did something, would it be in FY20 or would it be beyond FY20?
It would be beyond FY20. We're looking at FY21 at this point for any renovation or replacement work on the windows.
We
So
can
why can't you
provide,
just approve what's before us, and then we were going to come back, because this is not going to be an FY.
That's a acceptable way to go
I'm
forward
fine
as
with
well.
that.
we have a very detailed engineering report that we got in September of last year that we can either provide or summarize for you.
Okay, so we'll approve what we have in front of us, and then,
Okay.
yeah, okay. That's fine, Rafita, did you have a
Yeah,
question?
well, I was just going to say, I totally agree with that, and I think maybe it would be helpful if we could have a briefing after budget on the full COB projects, how we got to where we are and where we're going from here, because I think, this is one piece of what is, obviously a much, bigger aspect, and we've been dealing with it since I've been here as a piecemeal, and tons of work had taken place before I even got here, and I think that might be helpful for us to, figure out how we bring this in for hopefully a softer landing.
Mr. Orland would be happy to provide us with a
Greg and I
full
consider
But,
that
because-
overview.
I would say.
merits of tearing it down or building a new building.
Oh, Lord, let's just not go there again.
I would say, as someone very intimately familiar and acquainted with all of the aspects of this project, I will be more than happy to provide that update. I will say that there have been a lot of issues that have come up as we've gone through the renovation project that it's just hard to to really plan for. This is a very old building. It's a conglomerate of a number of buildings, so it's just been really hard to work with.
We can have that overview and then take a look at the tearing it down, building option, cost versus
We're a little
where
past
we are
that.
right now,
Yeah,
which
no,
is,
that would be
no, but it's, it's important to take a look at the two options, because
Well, let me-
that's what we had to debate when we made this decision. We knew that there would be surprises, but it paled in comparison to what some folks wanted to do, which was to completely tear it down and rebuild it, right?
I will give two people a lot of kudos for, as challenging as this project has been. Ms. Price has done an excellent job representing
Amazing
the
job.
council's interests as
Yeah.
your project representative. And in the audience is Charlie Edwards, who's the project manager on this project. Charlie, raise your hand. There he is. And talk about herding cats. Both of these folks have done felines. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, that's true.
I haven't figured out who "we" is, but sure.
These two individuals deserve special note and gratitude. So
Oh, they do, and it's been, yeah, when the proposal came through, we looked at it and it was like, how are we gonna do this? And here we are, it was just very seamless. It was amazing.
yeah. Well, the results
Awesome.
been pretty good. I mean, as far as lipstick on a pig, this has been pretty good lipstick.
Okay, here we go, all right, so is that it for this
Yes.
item?
What a
Okay,
word.
so I think that we will, without objection, we will accept the council staff recommendation with the exception of an addition of the $55,000 on the
Yes.
rec list for another position.
Yes.
Okay.
If council will allow me, I wanted to recognize two people who are important now and will be important into the future. Our new ADA manager, Ms. Emily Lucio, is here. Emily, raise your hand. She is expert in things ADA and is now representing the county on these matters. And Mr. Greg Boykin, who comes to us with a lot of experience, is our new facilities chief.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome.
I will.
Very nice.
I'll be handing out Greg's home phone number to council members.
Very good. Cell, home, all of that, yeah. We already have yours. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so
Thank you.
much. All right, so item number 3 is our FY20 operating budget for Department of Finance, including risk management non-departmental accounts. All right. That's weird. All right, so let's get started. Mr. DeFazio, thank you for putting together this packet. And welcome, Mr. Cavayu, in this new role as Acting Director of Department of Finance. Good to see you. It's good to see everybody. All right. Ms. Hawkins is here. Mr. DeFazio, walk us through the packet and our decision points as well.
Okay, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Overall, the FY20 recommended finance budget is $89,645,237, which is an increase of $5,702,972, or 6.8% over the FY19 budget. Within the total budget, the general fund is $15,601,135, which is an increase of $1,103,118, or 7.6% over the FY19 budget. The self-insurance fund, risk management, is $74,044,102, which is an increase of $4,599,854, or 6.6% over the FY19 budget. And finally, the risk management NDA is $19,791,523, or an increase of $2,374,272, or 13.6% over last year's. So I'm briefly going to go over the major changes, and as needed, we could talk more about the items. So for FY20, Finance continues to put a high priority on information technology initiatives, including re-engineering procedures for tax refunds, implementing a new web display for the tax billing system, and updating the timekeeper software. These IT initiatives are included in the increase of $268,710 for the ongoing IT maintenance. Finance's budget also includes adding a 10-year fiscal plan consultant for $100,000. This consultant will supplement existing OMB and finance work validating models, assumptions, and narratives for the formulation of a 10-year fiscal plan. The budget also includes the annualization of 3 positions added mid-year in FY19 to staff the new Financial Analysis and Compliance Unit. The last major general fund change included is the abolishment of the vacant Deputy Director position to implement Bill 319 non-merit positions. The Self-Insurance Fund or Risk Management budget mainly increased due to an increase in claims expenses, which are increased estimated by the actuary. All of the coverages have increased by 5.85%, with general liability and automobile liability increasing the most. Staff does have concerns about the contribution and the fund balance for the self-insurance fund. The fund is supposed to maintain an unrestricted net asset balance sufficient to achieve a confidence level of 80 to 85%. That funding will cover all incurred liabilities. The FY19 approved budget only funded 65%, and this year's budget is at 55%. Last year, the projection to get back to 80% was supposed to be in FY22, and now it's in FY23. Also, the FY19 fund balance was negative 0.19%, and it is projected to be 0.1% at the end of FY20. So overall, council staff recommends to approve the budget as submitted for Finance and Risk Management NDA. And now I'm going to turn it back over to the committee chair.
All right, so can we talk first a little bit about the 10-year fiscal plan consultant? Are there any plans? I know there have been a lot of conversations about obviously, taking a step back to do some closer examination regarding some of our indicators, some of our targets, et cetera. And I assume that this is what this consultant is going to be looking at, broadly speaking. We also, have had conversations, I know, with the executive about the council also working very closely in order to pretty much hopefully be on the same page going forward with this kind of fresh look. Are there any plans for that? How is that going to be executed?
Right, yes. We've already engaged one of our financial advisors to assist with this process. We're on stage 1 of it, actually, which is scoping out what we're looking at. I think you're aware that we're actually looking at what Baltimore City had done several years ago regarding a 10-year plan to sort of start the conversation. So we're still in the very beginning phase of that, and we actually are meeting with the CAO next week or the week after to kick off the next phase, which is actually defining all the terms, defining all the areas that we're looking at, so that we're all on the same page.
Okay, well, yeah, and I think because you are in the beginning phases of that, I just want to reiterate for the record that we are and been engaged in a real active conversation about working together so that, for example, when it comes time for budget deliberations regarding things like reserves or OPEB or negotiated agreements and things of that nature, it is clear that we have to do some in-depth, I think, analysis and hopefully be able to validate or not whether our targets are what they are. And obviously regarding our rating agency visits, which, been going with many of you for many years, so important that we are aligned because, it cannot be just a county executive or administration process. At the end of the day, the legislative branch plays such a significant role in final adoption of many of these particular targets. So I just want to reiterate that for the record, that it would be important for us to engage early on and hopefully work together with our analysts in coming up with some agreements around this. That would be super productive and I think very useful.
Certainly, that will be on the agenda when we meet with the CAO in the next couple weeks.
Awesome. And then the risk management piece, I think that it's another one that obviously we're very concerned, but I'm going to turn it over to Councilman Katz.
Thank you very much. Yes, the whole thing for about the self-insurance, the 65% is a concern of mine. I don't know about everybody else, but it certainly is a concern. And And in order to get, according to the PAC, in order to get to 80%, we need about 11.5 million, and in order to get to 85%, we need 15.2 million. What has been the historic numbers there? I mean, how did we come to only being at 65%?
Hi, I'm Kimberly Gay Armour. I'm the chief of the Risk Management Division. And the end fund balance, the asset balance, has varied somewhat over the years. It depends on how losses do, what we pay out. And we've historically very much tried to stay, you know, at least at the expected level, which is 55%. That's an actuary's term. But just due to losses, a couple of years ago, the council actually appropriated $3.4 million away from our budget, and so that did affect the balance at the end of the day. And so we look to get closer to the policy that was determined many years ago, that we are closer to 88 to 85%.
Have we ever been at 88%?
I believe that a number of years ago we have been. I can check into that to get an exact answer.
If we can have a listing over the last several years, not that it has to go back
Yes.
to the beginning of time, but if we can have a listing of what percentage we've been at, so that, I mean, because this really is a concern, but if we're normally at 65%, it's a concern, but it's not as much of a concern that way. So I'd appreciate that. And one of the other things that I get people talking about, when they send their check to pay for their property tax, and it goes to, I believe, Pennsylvania. And that is always a concern, why someone is paying their property. I understand it's where we're doing the processing, but it does seem that we could have some sort of a local mailing address or something for someone, rather than having to believe that it's going to knowing that it's going to Pennsylvania for the process.
Well, we could do that. We did it for many years. We had bills go to a P.O. box in Gaithersburg, and then they were distributed to the lockbox company in a different place. But the fact of the matter is, if you do that, then you are losing a day on processing, and people's bills get posted a day later than they normally would, assuming that the mail moves from somewhere in Montgomery County to Philadelphia. Philadelphia just happens to be where our bank, who runs the lockbox operation, has its lockbox operation.
Maybe we should convince a lockbox operation to move to Montgomery County. It just seems so strange that we're doing that.
Well,
So-
when we bid out the banking contract about 10, 11 years ago, there were no local banks that actually could do the work and bid on it. So the lockbox operation is just part of our banking services contract. So normally, we wouldn't go outside of that. It would cost us a lot more to do that. So we've tried to be efficient and cost-effective in keeping it sort of under one roof to make it so that it works better for everybody, even though it looks like it's, you know, something that is maybe a lot of work going somewhere else. It is not a lot of work going somewhere else. The lockbox is automated. It has less than one full-time equivalent worker who deals with it. So there were no jobs lost in Montgomery County when we actually contracted with PNC to do.
You said it's been 10 to 11 years?
It's been 10 to 11 years that we've had PNC. It's not been 10 to 11 years that we've had the lockbox payments go to Philadelphia. They went to the Gaithersburg post office box until 2014. They've been going to Philadelphia since 2014.
But we haven't bid it out for that length of time, you're saying?
No, we haven't bid out we bid out the banking contract a couple of years ago, and then we had to pull it back. So we'll be doing it in the next few years.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I just wanted to tag along, because could you explain why you pulled it back and why we haven't been out to, I mean, I've been involved in several banking services RFPs at the state level. I mean, what you're talking about here is extremely basic services, lockbox being just one of them, but I mean, there's nothing that we do that's unique to us. Every large financial institution does exactly what we do. People send an envelope with a check in it, and then you have to process the checks and they have to post.
Right.
So why'd you have to pull it back, and why haven't we bid this out in 11 years?
Well, we bid it out when we had to bid it out. It had a term. I'm not familiar exactly with what the term of the contract was originally, but usually the banking services contract goes for a certain number of years, and then you can renew if the service is going well for a year or two at a time. When we bid it out a few years ago, it was at the end of the life of that contract with the multiple extensions on it. And when we pulled it back, I believe it was for non-conforming bid, but I'd have to check that. That wasn't in my area, actually.
Yeah, I believe we should be bidding it out again. I mean, I don't know why we have to wait a couple of years. I mean, I don't know what the contract was that we signed, but to me, and I know that there's local, I don't know whether they could handle this. You would know much more than I do, but there's plenty of local banks that might be interested that weren't here 10 or 11 years ago. So I just think we need to be doing that. And that wasn't my original concern. My original concern is that we're not sending the checks, but if that's another concern.
Okay. I mean, it's not the bank contract covers a lot more than just what you're thinking of as depository services and the lockbox services. It covers all of our credit card transactions and everything. It hits most departments. It's an enormous contract. It touches almost every county agency. It will take a couple years to implement. So, but we are planning on bidding it out as soon as we can bid it out. But it's not a small thing. It's a very, very large contract. And it touches almost every agency, and it will take a very long time to implement all the different services that we have.
I understand the implementation, but the bidding, if you don't start bidding it, it's not going to be implemented. So I just believe we should be doing that. Thank you.
Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I would just echo exactly what Vice President Katz said, and as I mentioned before, I mean, I helped to transition the 529 program at the state level from one bank to another bank. There's, it's not exactly the same, but it's a $6 billion program. There's 300,000 account holders. I mean, we're not the only place that has banking operations, and there are lots of parts to it, and I understand it's complicated, and there's security issues and, individuals' credit card and financial accounts and all of that, but I think that we should bid these services out. It could be that the incumbent wins, but the location should be part of the bid, not the only part of the bid, but part of the evaluation is the giving up 1 day of processing or the perception in the public that they tend not to like to send a check to an out-of-state service provider. And every jurisdiction deals with that. Every financial institution deals with that. And so I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And I'm just uncomfortable with the idea in general of not bidding out contracts for more than a decade and pulling back what is effectively sounds like, based on what we're hearing, these are, that would make it a contract for life in perpetuity, where we would really not be able to let taxpayers know that we're getting a good deal for their money and that we're providing good service. We very well could be, but unless we go out into the market and let the market determine it, we don't know. And so I think that is important. I had another question on these items. On page 7 of our packet, Part C, under Operations and Administration, the annualization of audit and compliance resources. So this is a $365,000, $522 increase. And based on what the information we have here, it's 3 new positions created mid-year in FY19 to staff financial analysis and compliance. Could you explain the impetus for the new positions?
Sure. And I'm going to ask Lenny to chime in if he would have anything to add. I'm Karen Hawkins. I'm the Chief Operating Officer with Finance. And so this was part of the implementation of recommendations coming out of the series of audits that took place for UNSIC audits and Inspector General audits and internal audits. And a number of our initiatives started before audit reports were finalized or while audits were in process. But if you may recall, one of the discussion items previously was a lack of centralized oversight over transactions that are not subject to the procurement regulations. And so this unit was identified as part of the solution to ensure centralized oversight over those types of transactions and the supporting documentation over those transactions at the front end of the process, not just the supporting documentation that would be submitted to accounts payable after a service has already been procured or a transaction has been entered into by a department. So there were a whole series of internal control enhancements that were put in place. This was part of them. So this unit looks, we changed our policies to require departments to establish direct purchase orders for transactions not subject to procurement upfront at the time the transaction was entered into. We have a central unit that reviews those transactions and the supporting documentation to make sure that they are appropriately not subject to the procurement regulations. We coordinate with procurement if there is a question or a concern. So that's a piece of work that this unit does. They also work with a forensic software that we have employed and a number of reports that we have established to audit on a post-payment basis transactions and to look for forensically for trends for payments that might be suspicious or inappropriate. And as part of that, we took the entire population, for example, of tests that our forensic auditors had done, and we evaluated each of those for implementation on a daily and ongoing basis at the county. And this unit also deals with and has implemented audits of other programs, but it's the procure-to-pay cycle. It's being involved on the front end in reviewing transactions, supporting documentation. It's coordinating with the Office of the County Attorney to ensure that where formal agreements are supposed to be in place, and that's the support we're seeing, they are in place. I'm sure I'm missing something. And so that was part of what was implemented mid-year. This is just the annualization of that. Lenny, would you have anything that I overlooked that you would add to that? So that gives you a kind of a taste of some of what that unit is.
That's helpful for me. I had suspected that. So these are positions that are now being created and a team that is basically helping to implement part of the recommendations from the IG report that we received in December. Is that?
Yes and no. Yes to everything you said except for the positions were already created last year. They were filled. That unit has been in operation effective February 1. We implemented the direct purchase order policy back in the beginning of December, I want to say. We held training sessions for departments in December and in January so they would understand the policy changes and the process changes. And beginning in February, we started revised workflows and we started the requirement that those transactions up front, when they're being entered into, and we have a direct purchase order by the department, that whole package is submitted to finance for our review. So we are looking centrally at those transactions early in the process, just like the county attorney's office is now looking at the formalized agreements up front and early in the process for those transactions that require a new formal policy related to agreements.
Terrific.
It's in place.
This committee, whether we were sitting as the audit committee or as the government operations committee, has done a lot of work in trying to think comprehensively about financial oversight, and so I think this is a step in the right direction on the executive side, and we have work that we're continuing to do on the legislative side. I just want to understand, so the positions, these were existing vacant positions that were basically reclassified into new roles, that you hired new people, or you moved people who were doing other jobs and you had them move into this role?
These were new positions. These were newly created positions because this was a whole new set of work that had never been done before and related to new business processes, an entirely new workflow, new policies, a whole new set of work. So these were new positions. They were recruited for, and they were filled by a combination of internal candidates and external candidates, all of which have a variety of auditing experience, for example.
Got it. And so the new positions, have they come to the council before now? Or you've used vacancies, and so you didn't come to the council for the new positions because they were with vacancies, and now we're approving the 3 new FDs? I'm just trying to understand the
I would
process.
probably look to OMB for that, but
For the record, Jed Millard, Administrative Services Manager for the Department of Finance. To create a new position, at least on the executive side, we submit a request for a new position through OMB and through OHR, and then they ultimately approve creation of a new position during the middle of the year. And at that point, or during the budget cycle for the following years when it comes to the council for annual.
So you can I mean, it's just a troubling situation. I think, to me, I have no problem with these positions, and I would have been very happy to support it. But you've basically, the way that this process works, unless I'm missing something, you fill the positions you'd like to fill, and then once you have them encumbered with a human being in it, you then, several months later, come to the council and ask the council to approve a position that has ongoing costs associated with it. You know, in this case, you know, basically $120,000 each, and ask us to approve it. If we were not to approve it, I don't know what would happen to these human beings that we have offered a job to. I guess they'd be inside the probationary period, and you could let them go and blame the council for it. But it seems to me that that is a process that, unless I'm misunderstanding how it works, it seems to be putting the cart before the horse based on how it should work.
So Mary Beth OMB, council is not actually approving the creation of the positions. In fact, they're providing the money. There aren't many mid-year positions that are created. That's unusual for that to happen. So it's not a situation where the executive branch is willy-nilly, but it's not a situation, maybe in the state there were more PINs were formally created. That's not been the process in the county.
So I mean, I take that at face value, but I still think that perhaps at another time we could take a look at this process, because it seems to me to be, you know, we are the appropriator of funds. We approve the appropriation of funds. 82% of our budget is personnel. So pretty much most of what we all do here is approve how many people do services that provide for our citizens. And in this case, it might not happen often, but in the cases where it does happen, we are being asked, after a decision has already been made, to basically dictate money that we are going to spend before we've had a chance to weigh in on it, on the appropriateness of that expenditure of funds that is an ongoing expense. Again, it has nothing to do with this particular proposal. I'm perfectly comfortable, and the financial control improvements, I think, are a step in the right direction, but I'm uncomfortable, frankly, by the process that seems that a new position is created based on existing money that you have within your budget, that creates a new position, and then after the fact, we have to decide, are we going to not allow that person to continue in the job that you've already hired them for just months ago, or are we going to?
I also don't think you necessarily want to end up in a situation where we have to wait for you to approve a position. That's not been the relationship. You haven't really approved the complement per se. That's been the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point, and I think that we could dig a little deeper. I know that my experience has been a little bit the reverse, where we have actually approved certain programs and initiatives and positions that actually were not filled. This is a very interesting and unique circumstance, because we all heard the reports from the IG as well as the private consultant regarding this very unfortunate situation that occurred, and we all agreed that this unit had to be immediately created, because obviously there had been some extraordinarily gaps that needed to occur. So I was under the expectation that that was our signal to sort of, validate that we needed to move as quickly as possible to create this unit and to address this, because if not, obviously we had already left ourselves super vulnerable. That's what happened with the situation with Mr. Peter Bang and all of that. So in this instance, I think that's important, but I think it does I think merit a broader conversation because, even though I personally do not want to be in the situation of having to approve every single, that's not how we do things. We do have to keep a broad eye on the growth of the personnel. I mean, because this is something obviously that relates to many other conversations that we're having with budget, and the executive has spoken about restructuring, et cetera. So I think there is a middle ground there to be had, but like I said, in my experience, it's just been the opposite, that we haven't had positions filled in time. Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you. And I'm in agreement with both of you. I am concerned that we're hiring a person, and not even a contract employee. This is an employee of the county, the way I'm understanding it, and not that we need to hear about each and every, go through get into the weeds with each position, but we should know about the positions themselves and where you're getting the money from. If the money is supposed to be for something else, and we're using it for this, then the budget process didn't work on that. And to the council president's point, many times the county council itself has said, we want to hire somebody for X and Y in whatever division, not necessarily yours. And the OMB or whoever comes back and says, well, we're not going to hire that person yet, we're going to wait. Well, if we're going to wait, then we should know who you are hiring.
Yeah. Well, and I think when we are doing the weighting, it's typically in the context of a savings plan, which does come back through you. I know there were problems with delays.
There were other issues that were
No,
outside
I
of the
understand.
savings plan.
Yeah,
There were
I
many,
understand. There were
many
some program
circumstances.
delays
Yeah.
in being implemented.
I think we do need to have the deeper conversation. It's not going to be here today, I can tell you, but I think we do need to have the deeper conversation.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other items, Mr. DeFazio?
Nope, I have no other items.
Okay, so with that, we will, without objection, accept the recommended operating budget for Department of Finance, including risk management, and the ACE. Thank you. All right. So moving right along to item 4. Mr. Gene Smith is going to join us.
Straighten everything out.
Of course, of course. All right, this is the FY20 operating budget for NDA leases, Working Families Income Supplement, State Property Tax Services, future federal, state, other grants, grants to municipalities in lieu of shares tax, Takoma Park Police rebate, municipal tax duplication. And Mr. Smith has prepared a packet, and I do want to say hello to Mayor Newton, who's here from Rockville, as well as Ms. Feinberg from the city of Rockville. And with that, we'll get started.
Sure. So we have a slug of NDAs today, as you just noted. A majority of the funding that we're going to look at today are in 2 NDAs, the leases and the Working Family Income Supplement. That counts for about 76% of the conversation. So we're going to just go ahead and jump in on the leases NDA. The executive is recommending a $21,179,577 for this NDA. That's an increase of $1.4 million approximately from last year's. That's mostly due to escalation clauses. That's just kind of built into the NDAs. Built into the leases. Naturally, a lot of the leases are going to be up in the air in the coming years as we move to Wheaton for many of ours, and some of our largest leases currently. And so this NDA will see some change, probably closer to fiscal 21 after we make that move for our departments over here in the Rockville core. The council staff also wants to note that the council added funding to this last year for the African American Health Program. That funding continues. It's reduced in this budget not because of need, but because it's being combined with the fiscal 19 money for the move, the build out, and all of the expenses they need there. Council staff does recommend approval of this, but we have executive staff here if there's questions related to this NDA.
I don't see any lights, so let's proceed. Council Vice President Katz.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I just did want to note that the ongoing saga of the tax duplication for municipalities is something that unfortunately has become a historic moment.
We'll get there.
You're going to get to it, okay.
Get there real quick. Next time you need to put that in front.
Sorry, I put that one at the end. Next time I'll.
I think that's
Put up the order.
that's the lead. That he was leading on.
He was
on-
leading.
yeah.
Right, okay.
Maybe with his chin.
All right.
Right.
We'll put a
No
pin
no
on
worries,
that
no
one.
worries. So item
We're getting
B.
there.
Okay.
The Working Family Income Supplement, this is the county's supplement with the state's earned income tax credit. In effect, we're doubling the amount that working families received from this through the state. Currently, it's set at 100% of the cash back that they receive from the state. The executive does recommend a reduction of $3.2 million to this, but that's not based on need, that's based on actual use in the last couple of years. We're seeing fewer applicants. The data comes back from the state. The state runs the whole entire program for us, and so there's not a lot of individual data. We just see the global data, and the executive is making a recommendation based on the last couple of years to align this budget with actual usage. Again, finance staff are here if you have any questions, but council staff recommends approval of the executive's recommendation.
Okay, we have a question from Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, it's more of a comment than a question. I just wanted to note,
we have a comment.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we all share this commitment and talked about it during the savings plan, but this is an ongoing challenge that we face, and I don't have a strong disagreement with reducing this to what we actually believe the usage to be, but I think it reflects the fact that we're not doing nearly as good as where we need to be, because we know that the needs in this area are not diminishing, they're increasing, and we are just not doing a good enough job of ensuring that residents who desperately need the earned income tax credit are getting it. And there have been some improvements at the state level for some related tax credits, and I'm hopeful that in conjunction with those, some child care subsidies and other areas, that we could include this and really do a better, more proactive job at the county level in partnership with the state and some of the advocacy partners like VITA and CASA and the Cash Campaign and many of the others who advertise this, to really make a concerted effort to do it. I'm hopeful that we have to come back with a supplement on this in all candor, because we have to fund it. I mean, we're a partner here. It's going to cost what it costs. And so I'm hopeful that we can, once we get through budget as well, work together in figuring out how we can boost this. And, but I think it's going to require the executive branch to really help us and to work with the state and with our outside partners to figure this out, because this is a huge problem, I think, that we are reducing it, although I understand the reason why.
All right.
All right. And I'll just note now, if I don't hear any other comments, it'll be a 3-0 vote unless heard otherwise.
Yeah.
So the next one is our State Property Tax Services NDA. Most of this is for the county's portion of the cost for the state's Department of Assessments and Taxation. By state law, we even need to cover 50% of their costs for the assessments of real and personal property in the county. It also includes several other tax credit programs that the state administers for us on our behalf. The total program request for this in fiscal 20 is $3,565,615, which is the same as fiscal 19. Council staff recommends approval. All right. The future federal, state, and other grants NDA is a non-tax supported NDA. We appropriate this money in case we get grants. Saves paperwork later on. It doesn't actually appropriate any tax dollars. It's $20 million as it has been in previous fiscal years. Council staff recommends approval.
All right.
Grants to municipalities in lieu of shares tax. This is a long-term, that's not this one, this is the next one.
All right. Well, we're starting, we're getting there.
This one's only 28,000.
Believe me, I won't let
I
my
know.
mind wander twice.
We're getting there, we're getting there, we're getting there.
This is a very long-standing NDA. It covers the amount of shares tax from fiscal 68. It's been the same since 50 years ago, and it's $28,000 and $28,020. Again, staff recommends approval.
Okay.
All right, 2 more items for this set of NDAs. There's a Takoma Park police payment. This is a NDA that provides money based on county code. It is a property tax duplication issue, but because it's separate in county code, it's done through here. It's based on the actual assessments in the Takoma Park, or the city of Takoma Park. This is an estimate. The actual payment will be figured out after we get through the fiscal year. It's going up a little bit, and council staff recommends approval.
Councilmember Friedson?
Yeah, I just had a quick question about that, and maybe you started to answer it a little bit, and maybe I just kind of learned a little bit there, but we have some Rockville folks in the room, but we have other or other municipalities who have police departments, Rockville, Gaithersburg, Chevy Chase Village. I'm sure there are others. Is there, what, could you just explain the reason why they're different?
Sure, I mean,
Handled differently? Yeah. Why is this municipality different from all other municipalities?
Staff will have to go back and look at all the background, but my recollection is because it was both in the Prince George's County and Montgomery County at one point in time, the total municipality. And there's also another small part of the county code that deals with the libraries for Takoma Park, and both of those are based on tax duplication, and both of those are done through county code. So in this instance, that is my understanding. We can go back and double check it, but that's why it's different than, say, Rockville and Gaithersburg.
That's what I was
And you are absolutely correct. I mean, way back when, one-third of one-third of Takoma Park was in Prince George's County, two-thirds was in Montgomery County. Whatever year it was, they all became Montgomery County. But the county police did not, because they were split, the Prince George's didn't come into Takoma Park, or they could, but they didn't handle the day-to-day calls, and Montgomery County didn't. So when it became Montgomery County, then the Takoma Park Police still was a separate entity. And because of that, it's continued, and we're going to get to that for G. I don't want to jump but
Gene, I'm sure that there are many packets that you could forward to council.
Believe me, believe me. And if you'd like to take the lead on this, we could certainly help you
We
out.
can help, we can assign you.
I would never want to step on your territory. I understand.
No, but I know he's a new guy.
I just like to learn.
Yeah.
I appreciate you explaining.
He learned quickly.
It makes perfect sense to me, and I appreciate it.
No worries. Well, I'll go ahead and defer to Mr.
Well, no,
Now
so
on to
we
item
can,
G.
we're on item G, okay. So on item G, this has been the ongoing saga, literally, for everything you can think of plus. Montgomery County has never paid the other places that have police departments anything for their police departments. I mean, they've always said that they don't look at the municipal police forces, they would be doing the same thing whether the municipal police forces were there or not, which I don't believe that's correct, and I don't believe that it's fair. Having said that, this is an ongoing saga for 20 years or whatever it is, and I was hoping that we could solve this by this year's budget. Things unfortunately did not work out that we can solve it. We're still trying to get this thing back together. I pledge that I will try my darndest to figure out how we can solve this for next year's budget. But at this point, this is what we've had in the past, and this is, I think, for this year is the best we can do. That is not the best we can do in general and for other years coming forward.
That is correct. The fiscal 20 recommended budget from the executive for this NDA is the same as fiscal 19 minus a small change in the speed camera sharing program. And as Mr. Katz said, any changes to this will both involve the council and the executive in terms of how we agree upon making these rebates. Other than that, council staff recommends approval for this NDA.
Okay. So hearing no objection, I think that we will accept the recommendation, the council staff recommendation for all of those NDAs. Okay, and then the last item is the executive, is the FY 20, well, it's to review and make recommendations regarding debt service. This is another part of our FY 20 deliberations, and for that, Mr. Smith, you're also staffing this item.
Yes, I am. I'll go ahead and wait till my finance colleagues join us. So yes, this is the debt service budget that's for fiscal 20. The executive's recommendation is $439,224,240. This is an increase of $10,150,130 from fiscal 19. The table on page 1 lists the expenditures, increases or decreases related to the various areas of this budget. Council staff, as always, notes the debt service budget is a culmination of a lot of items for the council. It's both the decisions of many years for the current appropriation based on what our fiscal obligations are for bonds and long-term and short-term debt, The fiscal plan in the budget also shows us kind of where our long-term plan is going based on the current spending affordability guidelines and other plans for long-term debt or other lease obligations. But naturally, all of this comes down to what we've spoken about during other areas of the budget today. The county has the highest bond rating due to its fiscal policy issues, which for debt service, it means lower debt service costs, and that also is part of this budget. And so we enjoy lower budget costs because of the bond rating agencies, or the rating that the county receives. So to that, most of the budget is the general obligation bonds. And council staff goes through those, looking at various items, both in terms of growth. The expenditures for this will increase again this year. The other thing that's included in the appropriation is the expectation for a $320 million Geo Bond Issuance in 2019, interest payments on our bond anticipation notes, and then other long-term or short and long-term financial obligations. The other item that council staff wanted to note is for the other long-term debt expenditures. These continue to go up based on other financing options that we've chosen. Council staff does mention a few in the packet based on the Wheaton redevelopment project, which is a long-term project that we've been working on, and also for the Rockville Core and incubators. This will issue $70 million in debt. It's not GEO debt. It will be paid through other sources, but it's in this budget, and it's a growing area of the budget and something we want to keep an eye on as we move forward. Council staff recommends approval of the budget, but we also have finance staff here if we have any questions related to this.
I definitely want to point out to page 3 when it talks about the primary factor driving the increase in total debt outstanding is the expectation that the county will issue more debt that it will retire during the next fiscal year. However, the overall trajectory for the county's total debt outstanding continues to improve, because the council made a decision to reduce the spending affordability guidelines for the capital budget, and believe you me, that's never easy, but we have started, obviously, to work very collaboratively to start, addressing this issue, and I also hope that the previous item regarding the money for the consultant is going to look at all of these different aspects. Obviously, hopefully, we'll be looking at this issue of debt service because it is something, again, that we have got to address as well. Nonetheless, the AAA bond rating obviously helps us quite a bit, and it obviously would be much worse if we were to jeopardize that. So just wanted to point those two items out. Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, Council President. You took the words literally out of my mouth. I wanted to read page 3 in its entirety.
Shall we frame it?
Yeah, we should, and make certain that we keep it in mind. We're still far from where we need to be, but this obviously is a change from what has been done in the past, and it's something that should be noted, and really, as was pointed out, is not easy. But I do think that that in doing the way that we're doing it, we're trying, and it should be, and it is pointed out, that a lot of what we are doing here is because of past debt. Yep. And so we can't change it overnight, but the sooner we can change it, the better off we are. And as I like to point out, I guess it's like $430 million or whatever we're paying in debt service each year. If we weren't in debt, we certainly are always going to have some debt here, but if we weren't in debt, can you imagine what we could do with $430 million? Mm-hmm. So it's the right way to try to get there, and we just have to keep on course.
Thank you for that, and I was going to credit both of you for your work and the work of the executive branch and working together, but I think really the two of you deserve a lot of credit. I've been critical of some aspects during this budget process, but I think this is an area where I have been very complimentary and continue to be complimentary that we are doing the part of this fiscal plan that was committed to, which is bringing down the long-term debt that we have as a county, recognizing that we have to pay the bill, and the fact that the third line item in the budget is debt service, and to continue to grow that line item is a huge problem and has huge implications long-term. And I think the recognition that was made before I got here, and the long-term trajectory of bringing that numbers slowly down, understanding that you have to catch up to the decisions that were made long before, and the bond capacities that we have takes time. And this is a large cruise ship, and it takes a while to bring that large cruise ship back in from sea. But I think that if you look at the long-term debt portfolio, it tells a really good and important story, and I think it is one of the key reasons why we do have that AAA bond rating, which when we get to the next page, we're paying less than what we're projecting in debt because of it. And I have read some of the reports to talk about what the impacts are of that AAA bond rating, and to have a state, which is our largest partner, have a AAA bond rating, and for us to have a AAA bond rating combined is a hugely beneficial aspect. So I just wanted to credit everybody for that. I did just have one kind of curious question. Speaking of page 3, at the end of the revenue overview, there's a mention of the decrease of 10.1 million, and it's credited in FY20 with lower than anticipated Geo Bond premium. Could just explain that for a minute?
Sure, and first, staff will own that one because the word anticipated it should have been actual Geo Bond. So that was from last year's, last year's. I'll defer to finance on which year it was, but we're not expecting Geo Premium this year. This is a Geo Premium that was issued in one, and it was just a typo. But I'll let finance answer how Geo Bond premiums work.
Jacqueline Carter, Department of Finance. What this is referring to is that when we issue Geo bonds and we generate some premium, the IRS allows us to include a portion of it. It's restricted as to how much you could actually include in your operating budget. And so we have used that in the operating budget. So the $10 million he's referring to is a portion of the premium that was included in the operating budget, and it can be included over a period of years. So it had been actual premiums that we generated that had been offsets to the debt service.
And the delta of the 10 million lower than projected, that delta is a result of interest rates, or?
The 10 million is actually the difference between 19 and 20. He's saying, what we're saying is the amounts that were in the budget for 19 for this premium compared to 20 were higher. But it's actual money that was generated as a result of debt issuances. It's not a projection.
Okay. So it's so the FY20 money, we're taking the money that we are getting in premium that we're allowed to and using it for FY20 budgeted expenses as part of the operating budget. So it's actual, not projection.
I guess the confusing part is, if you do a bond sale in 18, for example, and you generate 20 million in premium, say,
right,
you could write off a certain percentage of that based on a specific calculation over the next 3 years.
Right.
So what you're seeing in the debt service budget is essentially accumulation of premiums that have been apportioned over future years. And we're now at the stage where those premiums are being depleted, so that's why in 20 the number's going down.
So the 10 million is a year-over-year
Yes.
comparison. It's not based on I was confused about the projection, that we missed a projection. I couldn't figure out how you would miss a projection on a bond
No, it's
premium.
Actual premiums.
Oh, and that was what you're saying is that, okay, now I understand. So, okay, sorry. So it didn't make sense to me I would think that, but it's year-over-year delta that you're talking about, not we missed a projection, because it wouldn't make sense to me. Okay, thank you, sorry.
It's because the actuals can be used in future years, and maybe in the budget allocated to future years, because you're restricted as to how much you can apply.
Right, and you're spreading it out over the window of time that you're allowed, 3 years. Okay, thanks.
All right, is that it?
Yep, that's it. I appreciate the council members pointing out the one sentence that I had a memory lapse to. But I'll use that as an opportunity that this council will have a chance to return to the spending affordability guidelines in September, and we'll pull that sentence out again. But yes, no, council staff recommends approval of
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I
All
think
right.
that's a good one.
So without objection, we will approve this particular item as well, debt service, and we are adjourned. Thank you.